This is Marianne with the Sustainable Living Podcast. I know that many of you like beer, right? Well, for today's interview, I have the Director of Brewing Operation of a rather large local microbrewery in San Diego. His name is Yiga Miyashiro, and we are talking sustainability in brewing, also exploring the idea of home brewing, and what it takes to start a microbrewery. I know that many people want to start their own business, so we are kind of exploring that a little bit. And beer is such a hot topic right now, so many people love it. So, this director of brewing operation also happens to be my son. And he was a homeschooler. So, homeschoolers out there, listen up. All of this is possible when you follow your passion. I hope you enjoy this show. Oh, and before we get into it, this was an interview we did on a family gathering with an iPhone. No microphones at all. There's background noise. There's an air conditioner going. So it is not the greatest sound quality, but it's, I believe, good enough to listen to. So forgive the humming of the air conditioning in the background. On to the show. Enjoy. Okay, Yiga, what's going on?
Hey, Mom. We are sitting at Ralph's house, hanging out in the backyard. We just crushed some barbecue chicken and slow roasted pork shoulder, trying to speak over the air conditioning unit. So if you hear a hum in the background, guys, our apologies, but that's what happens when you're just doing a podcast out in the beautiful SoCal summer backyard weather.
It's called Out in the Wild.
Out in the wild, indeed.
We are out in the wild podcasting. That's what this is all about.
And you can hear the birds and the bees.
The birds and the bees are really important. We like them. That's totally what we need. Are we going to talk sustainability or are we going to talk beer today?
I think we should talk both. I think we should talk sustainability related to beer.
Okay.
And we'll have to see how we are able to crisscross the two because obviously coming from the beer side, there's definitely some things that are not super sustainable because we use a lot of water and a lot of energy and things like that. But there are steps that I know that we take to try to make it more sustainable.
Okay, Yiga, can you tell me who you are?
Yes, so I am Yiga Miyashiro, the son of the great and epic and wonderful Mariana Hornline, one of the best women in the universe, and she has allowed me to be the person I am, and I am a humble brewer who has started my career as a beer delivery person, and now I am technically I'm a senior director of brewery operations. I think they gave me the senior title because I got gray hair popping out of my head.
Hey.
But I look after the operations for St. Archer, which is a beer company here in San Diego that we make beer, and it's tasty.
Yeah, so this company is pretty big compared to where you started out, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I started at a brew pub, Pizza Port Brewing Company, which was a great company, makes awesome beers, really cool owners, owned by a brother and sister. And to put in perspective, at the last brew pub that I was the head brewer at our largest year while I was brewing there, we made, I think it was 1,200 barrels. Each barrel was 31 gallons. So I'll have to pull out my little smartphone and try to do some math, but a little... So anyways, 37,200 gallons of beer is what we did. Now we're doing 40,000 barrels, or
1,240,000 gallons.
Gallons of beer. So
So is that considered into overall a big brewery, so, or compared to like what is the big beer names like?
we're still, I think we're like medium small in the scheme of things, because there's like here in San Diego, the big boys are Stone Brewing Company and Ballast Point Brewing Company, and both those guys, I think I haven't checked recently, but they're doing like 600 to 700 thousand barrels of beer. Is that right?
That's
Yeah.
a lot of beer.
They're doing a lot of beer. So
yeah, a lot of beer.
yeah, we're in I think 7 states now, while a lot of these guys are in 30 to 40 plus states. So.
Okay. So if it brings it back to sustainability, just probably the brew pub you were in the first place would be more in the sense of sustainability because it was local and people, there's not that much transporting going on. They weren't spread all over the place, right?
Yeah, 100%. So, excuse me. Edit that out on the back end, please. Anyways. So, I mean, the brew pub is great because, yeah, the only thing we have to really ship in is our ingredients. So we'll ship in our malt and our hops and our yeast. And after that, we're making everything on site, and then we're serving everything on site. So the customer comes to us, and we're using a reusable glass, and the vessel that we're serving the beer out of, we clean it, and then we fill it back up. And so, I love brew pubs because, yes, they're very sustainable. They also build community. They're a great place to bring family and friends together and have people come together and have conversations and really be a I don't know if the right word is a center, a cornerstone. Like, you look back in history and it's like people came to the pub and they, after their day of work, they visit each other and they told story and did the whole thing. And so that definitely is a great and amazing thing about a brew pub. And so support your local brew pub. There's great people there, and you meet great people at a wonderful brew pub. So I can't say more good things about it. Also, what we're doing is we're trying to spread great beer to more people than the reach of a brew pub, and with that, we go into keg beer to serve draft to local bars or bars across the state or different states, and then we also bottle and can. We focus more on canning, which is a more sustainable package than bottle, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But I guess the draft thing is probably the best because it's a reusable container. It's a stainless steel container that after we fill it full of beer, when we serve it, we get it back to us, we clean it, and we fill it back up again.
So do people, what is the legality of taking a container to any kind of bar and brew pub, fill it up, and take it home?
For like your home, like you're like a local, like you have a kegerator at your house, and you want to,
or just instead of buying a 6-pack, that you go and buy a gallon of beer.
So I can only speak for California because that's the only laws I know. I think it changes from state to state. For us, right now, you can go to the brew pub or the brewery and you can bring in either the container that is branded from that brewery, and then some breweries will allow you to bring in an unbranded container, and it needs to be the correct amount and approved for beer. So it's usually 64 ounces is a typical growler. And
so this thing is called a growler.
A growler, yeah. So, and you bring in a growler, and if it's clean and everything like that, and the brewery wants to fill it, they'll fill it. I know for us, for quality, what we would do is we wouldn't fill someone else's, but we would trade in someone else's growler when we'd fill our own that we knew was clean and there wasn't, junk in the bottom or anything like that, and we would fill it so that they would have the best experience when they drink that beer.
And then you would wash the container they brought to you, and then that gets reused?
Correct, yeah. So if it was one of our own containers, then we would wash and we'd reuse it. If it was someone else's container, like from another brewery or something like that, we would wash it and then we would give it away to our employees to use. So for employee growler fills and stuff like that.
And can you go to a bar, or that's only legal going to a brewery?
It's only legal going to a brewery right now, but that could change. And I know in a lot of other states, there's even gas stations that can fill growlers. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So
gas station seems like a bad choice to get an open bottle of beer, basically.
It's sealed. It's sealed, and always be responsible. Don't drink and drive. But we're in a society that's reliant on the motor vehicle. So if you're buying beer, you're probably going to hop in your car and drive home and just have the the ability to wait, the self-control to wait till you get home before you drink it.
There you go. Very good, very good. So, okay, so that's one aspect where, again, it's the smaller breweries coming in where you can eliminate a lot of packaging by buying your beer that way, right? Okay, so now you're in a bigger brewery. Do people still have the option to come and fill a growler there, or you're not operating on that system there?
Yeah, so we still fill a growler. We'll fill growlers, and then obviously we do all the packaged beer. You know, the upside, though, the more, I think, sustainable thing to bigger breweries is we're more efficient than small breweries. So we use less energy, we use less water. Everything that we're doing is using less resources to make the amount of beer that we're making. Or like if you were to kind of, I guess, chop it up to look at the brew pub, we were doing 15 barrels at a time, and now we're doing 40 barrels at a time. There's in proportion, there's less resources used to make that larger proportion of beer. So that is obviously the benefit of scaling up, is you gain efficiencies in the energy you use. And I know, like, one thing for our brewery we're doing right now is we're focusing very heavily on efficiencies. So we're putting in places pieces of equipment that will recycle chemicals and allow us to use less water and less energy. And we're looking at ways to recycle energy and things like that so that we can be more sustainable. All of our grain we give to a farmer so that it feeds cattle or gets used in a compost. Also, we side stream all of our yeast and hops and things like that normally would go down the drain and just into the wastewater system at a smaller facility. But for us, it's going to a processing plant that will distill the alcohol that might be left over in the yeast, and then it'll take that yeast protein and things like that and turn into compost or dog food or something like that.
Oh, that's very cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So describe a little bit, like, what is a process of a typical operation?
So, I mean, for the brewery, I mean, we've got a bunch of different departments, obviously. I mean, there's sales, there's marketing. I focus on operations. And the process of beer, I mean, I guess we can go a quick little description of that is, so we'll bring in all the raw ingredients, malt, malted barley, which is where we get the sugar, where we convert the starch from the grains into sugar that creates food for yeast. So we bring in yeast. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. I guess we mix water with the malted barley, where we're able to then convert that starch into sugar water. Then we bring in hops, and the hops will help balance out the sweetness in the finished product. It also acts as a preservative, so that wild organisms won't infect the beer. But really, it tastes really nice, and that's, I think, the main reason we use it nowadays. And at the end, we introduce yeast, and the yeast will eat that sugar water and create alcohol, which is what we're all going after. And so, I mean, at the end of the day, the yeast does all the hard work, and as brewers, our true job is just to keep the yeast happy and healthy and make sure that they're able to do their job. So that's what we're doing with that. So in the brewing operations, we have brewing, where we're creating that wort or sugar water with the hops and everything added. Then we have the cellar. The cellar is looking after that yeast. They're making sure the fermentation temperature is correct. They're pulling that yeast off of the beer and reintroducing it into new wort or new beer and making sure that the yeast doesn't get stressed out. Also, we're in San Diego. We use a lot of hops, so we will dry hop our beers and everything like that in the cellar, and that's where we get that amazing hop aroma and hop flavor that if you're a beer drinker that's used to West Coast style IPAs, or even now the new hipster New England style IPAs, that all those processes are going on in the cellar. The cellar will condition that beer, and they will filter or cellar that beer and carbonate it and release it for packaging. And then we have, I'm very proud of our packaging department at St. Archer, because we have a very robust packaging line and very talented people. And this is really what makes it or breaks it for the quality of the beer when it comes to someone who's grabbing a six-pack off the shelf. And so we've got a great packaging line, a great packaging crew, and we take a very high amount of pride in making sure that we put that beer into a can, bottle, or keg at the highest quality possibly can. Make sure that when you drink it later on, it tastes great. And that's really where, like I said, you can make it or break it right there in packaging.
That's interesting. So last process basically could ruin the whole batch.
110%. You know, are we allowed to curse on this podcast?
No.
Okay. Well, basically, packaging's job is to F it up the least amount possible, because nothing ever good happens from packaging. The best beer you'll ever have, and as a brewer, I'm spoiled, we're able to drink beer directly off the tank, and it is the best beer you'll ever have in your life. And if you ever get the chance, you know, people out there in the world, make a friend with a brewer and find out a way you can get a nice tour when they got beer in Bright, and you can get a beer off Bright. But, you know, for us, we know that not everyone can have that experience, and so we're trying to create as close to that experience as possible. And with that, when we package the beer, we're looking at how we can keep oxygen and light and everything like that away from the beer, which are all things that degrade the beer. Also, on the warehousing side, we cold store everything like that, and we really hold our distributors accountable to temperature control that beer as best possible, so that when you get it, you get as close to that Bright tank experience as possible. And that's really what we're looking for as well, because also something that's not sustainable is if that beer's not good and it needs to get destroyed, you know, because someone doesn't want to taste it because you didn't do your job right. And, you know, for us, it's all about keeping, if we can keep it local where our local consumer wants to drink it, then that is the best for us, obviously. But we still are having a high quality product and attention to detail, so that if it does have to travel, it's still a great experience. And if someone is going to put their time and effort out into purchasing that beer, they're going to get a good experience, or at least the best we possibly can deliver to them. So I want to know from your audience, what beers that really kind of make them tick, and what they're going after, and things that are important to them. You know, I'm obviously in my own little world on the operations side. I'm you know, very deep in the beer production and the San Diego scene that I've surrounded myself with. You know, I've been fortunate enough to be in San Diego that when I started, I think there was 11, maybe 12 breweries, and I knew all the head brewers. I knew everyone on the operations side and on the production side and everything like that. San Diego, along with the rest of the nation, has exploded in craft beer. I think San Diego has over 250 breweries now.
That many?
It's ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, don't quote me on that number right now. I mean, obviously that'll change with the time and date that you're listening to this, but it's to a number where I can't keep track of how many there are, who they are, and who's running what. And so there's a lot of great beer out there. So obviously, you know, experience as much as you can. But with that, you know, since there's so many, I can't try all of them. So, I,
So you want people to tell you what's their favorite?
let me know what your favorites are. Let me know, what you feel I should be seeking out and, expanding my, knowledge base, because it's a really fun, never-ending journey to see what other people are discovering. And I think that's one of the best things about beer is that kind of the creativity never ends, the passion never ends, and I know I really get a really warm feeling in my heart when I see, a new brewer, super passionate, just deep diving into things. And I mean, I'm still doing that, and I plan on continuing doing that. So let me know what you see. Let me know what you want to see. Obviously, not everything that everyone wants will ever happen, but that's true for everything, including myself, of what we want and what we actually see to come to fruition. But the more info we have, the better we can be at doing that.
Yeah, that's for sure. So you said some about that cans are actually more sustainable in glass. And I know in Europe, a lot of the beer is served in glass and the bottles are being sent back to the brewery and washed. But that's not the case here. So do you want to expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, definitely. So, I don't have all the data to know what is better. I mean, I think the culture of the returnable glass that's done in Europe is really fun. I love, going to Germany and drinking amazing beers and going to the beer store and picking things out. And I've been fortunate enough to actually visit some of the breweries that have some of these really huge returnable glass plants, and it's really, really cool stuff. Here in the United States, though, we don't do returnable glass. We do one-way glass, and so that glass gets used once, and then and hopefully it ends up at a recycler and it gets melted down and then turned into a new container. However, glass it degrades over time, and so you have to add new material into it, and so it's not a super sustainable package. Myself, I really believe in the aluminum can. The company I work for, St. Archer, we've transitioned towards the aluminum can. I mean, when we first started, we were just in glass. That was a huge push to get us into aluminum, and now over 90% of our packaged product, bottle versus can, is all in can. The beauty of aluminum can is it is recyclable infinitively. So it won't degrade. The aluminum that we've pulled out of the earth, we can continue reusing it and turning it into new packages. And so the can you're drinking out of today will be a can that aluminum can go into another can 100 years from now, which is, I think, a really great thing. Also, there's the energy of melting it down and creating into a new can, but also for reusable glass, there's a lot of energy and a lot of chemical, because obviously, as a consumer, you're going to want that bottle really clean. It has to be sanitized, everything like that, because beer is a very delicate product, and so any little bit of dirt or anything like that can ruin that beer. Also, though, just on a beer quality side, aluminum is much better than a bottle because it protects the beer from light, and also the process of putting the lid on. So actually, when we fill that can, there's no top. It's completely open, and then the top is put onto it, and then there's a seamer that folds that aluminum. So there's 4 layers of aluminum. If you kind of look at your can where you're drinking off of, what touches your lip right there, that's 4 layers of aluminum, and that seal right there will stop any oxygen from getting into your product. Same kind of technology that's closing up a Campbell soup can. So chicken noodle soup or whatever it is, exact same technology, and that's why, canned products are so rock solid that you can, have a can of beans on your shelf for a year or two. I don't know what technically they say you should keep a can of beans on your shelf for, but obviously it's much longer than just throwing it in your fridge. So but this is one of the, I think, the benefits of the aluminum can is that material that we've pulled out of the earth to use for this vessel, we just use over and over and over and over. And obviously, I hope all you guys are recycling. I know for me, I wish that my recycling picked up more often, because my recycling can is always full and my trash can is not. So
That's very good. Do you have any data or any information about, a lot of people talking about
Aluminum.
Thank you. It's a word I can't pronounce.
Uh,
Leaching into the beverage or food or anything like that. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so I think, in our grandfather's time, that was definitely a problem with the aluminum can or the steel can. The technology wasn't there, and your product would taste like the metal. Now what they do is they line that can with it's probably a plastic liner or something like that. They spray it, and so the beverage actually never touches the aluminum, and so the product is not getting any of that leaching of that metal into your beer.
So, what I wanted you to talk about is how you even got into that whole brewing thing. How did you start your career?
Ah. Ah. Well, I think it has to all go back to being a teenager and wanting to drink beer, but my parents saying, well, I'm not going to buy you any beer, but if you want, you can make your own beer. Because I think they were trying to call my bluff and thinking like, oh, I would never do that, and put a challenge to me, because to make beer, it's a 6-week process when you're home brewing. And so, or maybe they put the challenge thinking I wouldn't do it because I was a lazy teenager, but I called their bluff and went out and bought some buckets from the donut shop and went to the local homebrew shop because, hey kids, the ingredients, you could be making beer, you could be making bread, so it's totally legal to buy malt and
Chiming in here
yeast
real
and
quick,
hops and things
just
like
to be
that.
clear, we are not condoning underage drinking.
And anyways, went home, got the biggest spaghetti pot we had, and made some wort, cooled it down, put some yeast into it, and fermented it away. I went to the local Mexican food mart or Mexican restaurant and bought bottles from them because I was not old enough to drink, so I wasn't old enough to collect beer bottles to bottle with, and just paid for the CRV. And one thing, I probably wouldn't go to a Mexican restaurant because all those bottles had limes in it. So maybe find a steakhouse or a different kind of bar or something like that. Because I spent half my time just fishing out dried up limes out of these bottles and try to clean them to reuse them. But anyway, so I did that and made some pretty horrible homebrew. But I think it had just a little bit of alcohol in it. But who knows? At 17, I think it was just kind of the fact that we did it that was pretty interesting. And that was the beginning. But, what truly, I think, deep dove me into this whole beer thing is went to Germany with Mariana right here, who's sitting next to me, and had some really amazing lagers, had some amazing pilsners and helleses and things like that. I remember I had a carry-on bag, and this was before they had the liquid scare, and so I had a carry-on completely full of beer bottles that I brought back home, and just deep dove right back into the home brewing, and just brewed every single weekend. So my girlfriend, now wife, was very supportive of what I was doing, and thank you very much, Kristen. But she let me fill our second bedroom full of fermenting jugs of stuff, and I had a chest freezer, and I had these kegs called corny kegs, so I could keg off my beer opposed to having 50 to 100 different bottles of things. I had a kegerator and all kinds of jazz, all for the homebrew. And mind you guys, it was never the best homebrew, but it was homebrew that I made, and it was a lot of fun. And
by this time, it was legal.
I was legal, yes. I was 21 or 22 or something like that. So, but, had the support of my significant other who said I should pursue this as a career. And that's where I called up Pizza Port, Lost Abbey Brewing Company, and I interned with Lost Abbey for a while. I, had my regular job, and on my days off, I would go up there and work 8 to 12 hours and helping them whatever they needed. Bottle beer, wash kegs, scrub floors, shovel grain, just got my foot in the door. And then my first paying gig was at Pizza Port, and I was delivering kegs. And so took a huge pay cut, went down to minimum wage and drove beer around. But hey, I got free beer and free pizza, so I was able to eat and drink and made ends meet that way. And like I said, I had a very supporting girlfriend, now wife, and she allowed me to do that and was able to work my way up to where I am now. In between these two places, I had every production job at Pizza Port, opened a brew pub for them, built them a production facility, and then at St. Archer, I grew that company where we started. The first year we did, I think, 3,000 barrels, and then 5 years later we're doing 40,000. So, and we're on a second set of everything: second brew house, second packaging line, second cold box, second cellar. Like we pretty much built a brewery inside of an operating brewery, and then ripped out the old brewery so we could put more equipment in. So it's been a very cool, fun ride, and in my eyes, it's just the beginning.
So for all of you guys or girls who have a passion, this can happen. You can follow your passion and just go for it, right?
100%. I think whatever your passion is, follow it, especially if you can. I mean, obviously, don't follow it if like your kids aren't going to eat, and you're not going to pay your mortgage and things like that. Then you got to figure out another way to follow that passion. But money doesn't buy happiness, but it will give you some comfort. So if you need that, like I said, I mean, don't make your kids starve, but if you can afford it, tighten that belt and make it happen, because you can always go back to what you were doing before.
So do you think there is still room in the brewing field for people who might get excited to actually go into a brewery? Or is it a little bit unrealistic to think about opening your own?
That's $1 million question. I think there's always a place for someone to open something if they have an eye on quality and they are willing to put quality at the forefront. Because if they're just after the dollar and they don't care about the quality of the product, people will sniff through bullshit. Oh, sorry, edit that out. But people will sniff through an inferior product and they will not spend their dollars on it, because there's so many places out there right now that you can get really great, whatever it might be, whether it's a beer or a soda or a jacket or whatever it might be, that I think people are starting to focus more on quality, and especially when it's something you put in your body. So whether it's a meal or alcoholic beverage or non-alcoholic beverage or a supplement or whatever it is, I think more and more people are focusing on this better be worth putting into my body and worth the experience I'm paying for.
I totally agree with you. Said that's definitely a huge factor in success or not success. But it does cost quite a bit of money to open a brewery, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's very capital intensive, you got to buy all the equipment. Something that a lot of people forget too is making beer is, a 3 to 6 week process, 3 weeks on the short end and, 6 to 8 weeks on the longer end. Some beers are even longer. So your ingredient cost is tied up for quite a while before you actually see that, coming back in revenue from sales. And even once that product's done, it's not like the next day everything's sold, or at least on a brew pub side, that beer is going to be in a tank and slowly, one pint at a time. I mean, hopefully quickly, but it could be slowly, is going to be sold, and you're going to see that revenue back. So you have to have enough money in the bank to get you through a bunch of different cycles of buying ingredients, turning it into beer, letting that beer be into a tank and slowly selling it before you put it back in the bank and are able to turn that around to make another beer. So you definitely need to be aware of the reality of what you're getting into. But I think if you're realistic about what it is and you're making a good product, I think there's always room for great things.
So since you have been, and I don't expect concrete numbers here, but you have been involved in getting started quite a few or building quite a few breweries. So if somebody would look for like a smallish brew pub to open, what is the minimum investment they would look at? Not to be held accountable for, is it 100,000, is a million? What are we looking at?
I'm thinking a lot's going to depend, obviously, like what part of the country you're in, because real estate's going to have a big piece of it. But
without the real estate, just kind of thinking of like equipment cost.
I think you're probably, and this is just right off the top of my head. I haven't done any math on this. If we're talking a brew pub, probably, let's say $400,000 to $1 million. If you think about equipment and install and build out, that's probably the minimum, depending on the size and how much you're willing to do on your own, how much you're willing to deal with used equipment, which is not always the cheaper way to go. Sometimes used equipment is the more expensive way to go, and things like that. So, yeah, for like a 10 to 15 barrel brew pub, I would probably, just equipment wise and some install, I think you'd be lucky to get away with 400, probably more around $1 million, I would think. But I'm talking San Diego numbers as well. Who knows? Somewhere else.
But equipment is kind of not particular to an area, wouldn't you say?
Equipment's not, but install is, I think. Just because cost of living here is a lot higher than some other states. So I think, and install is everything. I mean, that's the thing, is you could have a great piece of equipment, but if your installer doesn't know what they're doing, they're not doing quality work, that equipment's not going to work right. So, if the engineer you're working with specs the wrong size boiler, the wrong size burner, or something like that, or runs the wrong size pipe, or puts too many bends in, or just wacky things like that. There's things that you don't even think of. Or even, one thing in brewing that I've learned is math-wise, you need to size everything to only 80% of its capacity, because you're going to take everything to 110% of its capacity. So you need to build in that buffer. And, that's part of kind of the growing pains and, the experience that I've had is, I've worked with a lot of people be like, oh, well, this should work perfectly. And they'll do all their calculations to 100%, but it's always 100% at these certain conditions. And the one thing I found with brewers is they will take everything, to the nth degree, and they will push every piece of equipment to its limits. So building capacity, it'll only make you more efficient. It'll keep your equipment running more smoothly, and even if you pay a little more up front, it'll pay dividends in the long run.
Okay, so you said used equipment can be more expensive. Why is that?
Well, you don't always know its history. It may not be sized correctly for what you're doing. But also, I think the biggest thing is you might think, oh, well, I'll just replace a couple seals, and then you find out you need to do a full overhaul on that piece of equipment, and then you discover that the parts aren't made anymore, so you're making all these custom parts. One thing to think of brewery equipment-wise is like custom-made cars. Even if people say, oh, okay, I've got this size brew house, or this size can line, or this size tank, pretty much every single one is built custom. It's not like you're going and you're getting a basketball at Walmart that they're just pumping out millions and millions at a time. They're making each one by hand, one at a time. So you could take 3, let's call it brew houses from the same manufacturer that were built, each one 3 months apart, and I guarantee you there's going to be something different from each one of those. Mm-hmm. And so that's just something to keep in mind, is that depending on what you're buying and what it is, there could be unknowns that could drive the cost of operation much higher than just buying a brand new piece of equipment that has obviously the manufacturer's support from the beginning, but also where you get to learn about it, and you get to learn, well, where's the support lacking, where you need to find that support internally or in your local area, or maybe it's a gasket or a bearing or something like that, and you go to the manufacturer and it's $1,000. Well, you find out, well, how can I make that for $100 locally, or how can I source that for $100 locally, which you won't have that ability a lot of times when you're buying used equipment. You just got to get up and going. you're going to be up against it timeline-wise, where you're just going to spend that money just to get going, opposed to being like, oh, I got this brand new. Oh, one time it was this expensive, had the part number, and I researched it and found a more cost-effective way of doing things.
Cool. So is there something else you want to say in closing?
I say
Drink beer.
drink amazing beer, support local breweries. More importantly, support breweries that are making high quality beer, because I think the only thing for me that's going to hurt beer is bad beer. And that's the one downside to so many people getting into the industry. I hope that everyone's learning and they're evolving, but for an uneducated consumer, what I don't want is someone who's still learning the ropes, for them to try a beer that still needs some work and they feel that, okay, well, all beer is bad. That's not good. So like, if you are a beer connoisseur and you have a friend that's like, I had so-and-so's beer, it wasn't so great, do all of us a favor, go find an amazing beer, find your friend and be like, hey, I understand you had that, but here, try this. This is something I really like. And also though, if you're super into triple or double IPAs or big barrel-aged stouts and your friend is a, American light lager drinker and is trying to explore craft beer, don't immediately turn them on to double IPAs, American, or big barrel-aged stouts. Maybe have them have a sip, but maybe introduce them to a nice Kolsch or a nice Hefeweizen, something a little more approachable right off the bat, unless they're really looking for that kind of 1-2 punch of flavor and aroma and everything like that. So who knows? I guess grain of salt with everything. Just drink good beer. Have fun with it. We're not curing cancer. We're just having fun.
That's right. Just having fun.
Yeah.
So you guys think about doing a podcast. What do you guys think? Should he do that? Let us know.
Let me know. I got a face for radio, so.
And he would have much better equipment, better sound qualities than today's. Let us know if you think that Yiga should have his own show. He's thinking about talking about the beer industry from an insider's perspective. If you think that is something the world needs, please do let me know. You can email at sustainablelivingpodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach me on steamer.com, either at Marianne West or as Sustainable Living. Just Sustainable Living. There's no podcast or anything because we were restricted in the amount of letters to be used. Also, I have told you before that I was doing regular Patreon lenses. That's little kind of snippets of video or pictures of daily life. And I did not do that for a while because my phone was not cooperating and nothing would upload. I'm still going back and forth with support. I did a bunch of stuff they asked me to do, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. But I will try my best to keep updating you with little snippets of what's going on. Thank you so much for listening. We so much appreciate you. Take care.